Hi, Mike from Heartland Pergolas, demonstrating how to attach your pergola beam to your already installed posts. For this step, there are two methods. The traditional method, which involves screwing through the beam and then in through the post top, and the beam attachment bracket. If your kit has beam attachment brackets, that's great. You don't need to do this step. There's another video for you. But if your kit does not, you're going to want to find this template in your kit with the instructions, and you're going to want to use that to lay out the 4 holes you can see down here in this beam. The first thing we're going to want to do, though, is get some measurements. I'll always measure from the base of my post to the base of the other. In this case, we've got our 7-inch square columns. I'll pull that measurement, and it is exactly 8 foot 96 inches, okay? And I'm going to want to check the measurement of my beams. In this case, they are 10 foot. So that's great news. That means the overhang of our beam is going to be 1 foot past the edge of this post. And we're going to have the same overhang 1 foot past the edge of this post. Now, it is okay if your beam overhang is not 1 foot. That is just our recommendation. If you want a farther beam overhang or less of a beam overhang, that's not a problem. You're more than welcome to trim these beams. They can all be cut to length with a standard circular saw and a non-ferrous blade. Or you can move your post mounts in or out to get your desired post spacing or beam length. So with our recommended 1 foot, we've got our 8 foot post space, our 10 foot beam, we should be all set. I use this template 2 different ways to lay out my holes. Anytime I have a 7-inch square or round column, this template measures 10.5 inches. It's the same distance as the top of the post. If I were to use the 5x5 post option, I'm not going to have this big clunky column top here. I'll just have a 5-inch square post. If that's the case, I always want to make a mark on the center of my template. And I want to pull all the measurements from the center of one post to the center of the other post and transfer those measurements down to the beam. In the case of this 7-inch square column, I can set my template on the beam. And I like to drill out all my beams at once. You notice I've laid all 4 beams down on here. I've pre-drilled some of the holes just to save some time on the video. But I will measure with my tape measure. I'll set this template edge exactly 12 inches from the end of the beam. And I like to kind of squeeze these together because it gets that template nice and tight. And I make a mark in the center of my hole, just enough to see. Remove my template, and I've got 4 holes. From here, I use a 5/8 drill bit. Just any drill will work. The 5/8 is the right size hole because down the road we're going to use these plugs to cover up these fastener holes. So I will start with the 5/8 hole, and I'll drill out all 4 holes. Right on my mark. And that will dot the aluminum. I like to then slide the aluminum out. I give it a little spritz of WD-40, that's poor man's cutting oil. And I use another drill with a step bit or a vary bit, and I'll drill these holes out nice and wide. Like that. It's good to keep a rag handy because that cutting oil kind of makes a mess. Go ahead and clean that off. From there, I can slide my aluminum back inside my beam. And sometimes it leaves little burrs. I don't know if you can see that on the video. Little burrs around these holes. You can either clean those out with a vinyl reamer. I use a drill bit. I just go back in there and make sure that they're all nice and clean. So now I've got my 4-hole pattern drilled out. And I do this on both sides of my beam. For the sake of time, I already did that side. The next step is to mount your beam. Now, what I like to do before I mount my beam is pull measurements from my beam and mark out with a pencil where every single one of my rafters is going to fall on top of that beam. You don't have to do it now, you can do it later, but if you're doing it later, you're going to be up on a ladder. So, in the sake of the brevity, we won't do that here in the video, but that is a handy time saver. So, we've got our beam all drilled out. In real life here, we'd have a helper to do this. You're going to lift your beam up onto your post, and if you measured everything correctly, this 4-hole pattern ought to lay out in the center of that post. We should be right at 12 inches there. And just to double check, okay, 12 inches there. Next thing we're going to do is get our driver with a 3/8 inch hex head. All of our fasteners are hex fasteners, save one. We like them because they stick right in the driver, they don't fall, and they're all 4/16 stainless steel. So you're going to want to find the fastener baggie labeled beam to post. Okay? And you're going to take that fastener, chuck it in your drill bit. We always use extensions to make it a little easier. And stick that through the hole. Got to hold real tight and drive it home. Now the beam will usually pull out from the post and then suck back in tight. You want to make sure that you get it all the way in there tight. Don't go crazy once it's tight because you could strip it out, but that's pretty much how you do it, and that's the sound it'll make. From there, I always keep plugs in my back pocket, and I'll take that hole and I'll plug it nice and neat. You repeat that step for each hole in the beam, plug the hole, you do the other side of the beam, and your beam's up and you're ready for rafters. If you have any questions, check us out at heartlandpergolas.com. You can download our written installation instructions. Thanks.